Welcome back, everyone. Today I want to take my last video's topic, Christian authenticity, and I want to apply it to a topic often either neglected or feared by most Christians, often both. That is the topic of evangelism, so let's get started. When it comes to the practice of sharing our faith with others in evangelism, I don't know if I can think of an area where authenticity could be more important. I'm sure you'll agree. If our Christian faith is first and foremost in our hearts and lives, and authenticity is about being transparent and honest about what's in our hearts, then surely being authentic as a person should inevitably mean being authentic about our faith. No Christian is perfect, and therefore no one is perfect in maintaining these priorities, obviously, but hopefully this is a goal we are praying and hoping for. And yet, as I've grown up in the church, evangelism seems to be systematically taught in a way that almost explicitly encourages inauthentic practices. What do I mean? Almost inevitably, in almost every teaching I hear about evangelism, I hear some form of what I've chosen to call Trojan horse evangelism. The gospel is brought into a conversation under the guise of a different topic. Your ultimate hope for the conversation is cloaked under something else. Let me explain. I'm old enough to have experienced training in what is often called cold contact evangelism. Basically, this means going out either by yourself or in a group and working up the courage to go and share the gospel with perfect strangers. The ultimate hope would be to seal the deal that very day and get them to say the sinner's prayer, accept Christ, and join a church. Now, I should mention, as a side note, that I've since realized that the sinner's prayer isn't exactly in the Bible. It's a modern phenomenon and is not exactly a practice you see the apostles using. That said, according to the book of Romans, things that make salvation evident are a true confession of Christ's lordship and true faith in his work on our behalf. The sinner's prayer can be one expression of this if it's coming from a true work of the Spirit in the heart. I just don't think we should put all of our stock in the sinner's prayer as if it is a magic salvation button or is a definitive or unquestionable evidence of salvation. It is a tool God can use, but it can be dangerous if we treat it as gospel. I just wanted to be clear on that. So with that out of the way, let's continue. So what could be more raw and authentic than cold contact evangelism? Well, hold up a moment while I share a couple of stories. I remember when I was part of various training sessions in youth groups and other contexts where tips, techniques, and tracks were shared about how to break the ice with a perfect stranger. In one track, I remember you would go up to someone and say, "Hey, want to see my pride and joy?" When the person thinks they're going to see a cute baby picture and says yes, you pull out a picture of Pride furniture wax next to a bottle of Joy dish soap. After you get a chuckle and they turn the picture around, there's a gospel presentation on the other side. Another example of this was a survey that we were given. You ask if someone wants to answer a few questions. The questions begin innocently, probing the person's basic spiritual views. But by the end of the survey, you're asking about the eternal fate of their immortal soul, and boom, you're suddenly dropping the gospel hammer on them. I've been in many trainings and teachings full of these sorts of what I would call bait and switch methods. Now, again, we're talking about authenticity, and so I want to talk about the fact that yes, these techniques made me feel inauthentic and rather dishonest at times, but I want to speak to the pragmatic question as well. There are some who simply do not feel that these techniques rise to a level of dishonesty worth worrying about, and are far more concerned about doing what is most effective. In other words, stop racking your conscience and get the gospel out there however you can. Let me tackle this authenticity versus effectiveness question with a couple of stories. When I was in Bible college, after a training session, my class and I went on a trip to a local mall to practice cold contact evangelism. We were equipped with some of the tracts and surveys I mentioned, among some other tools. After wandering around the mall nervously for a while, a friend of mine finally decided to work up the nerve and go sit next to an older man on a bench who looked lonely. I watched them have a friendly chat briefly from a distance, and eventually I saw my friend pull out the Pride and Joy track and hand it to the man. If I remember correctly, the man smiled and turned the card over. His smile then went away. The conversation seemed less positive after that. The man seemed distant, and eventually my friend walked back over to me. "That didn't go so great," he said. He seemed kind of annoyed. Well, that's my best recollection of the story anyways. Now, how about the surveys that we had? I remember there was one classmate I had who looked like he belonged on magazine covers. To be honest, he looked like a clothing model who belonged on the posters outside of the different clothing stores around the mall we were in. He got plenty of attention from women, and he kind of knew how to wield that power. He chose the surveys as his method of choice for evangelism. I remember watching as he had two very attractive girls walk up to him and agree to take the survey. They smiled and seemed to kind of bat their eyes at him and seemed to have a good time talking to him. Yet, even though I was too far away to hear the conversation, it was perfectly clear from the body language of all involved just when the conversation lurched from innocent survey to blunt gospel presentation. The girls' faces sank. They were clearly thinking something like, "I thought one of us might be giving this guy our number, but now I just want to get out of here." All in all, it was, shall we say, not a successful day for very many involved. The following year, it was time for my class to spend some time in New York City, where we had half of the semester to do various forms of ministry like soup kitchens, street preaching, and again, evangelism. At one point, we received similar surveys and went to a park. What was frustrating was that in our training in how to use these tools, it was almost implicitly communicated that we should not start the conversation stating what we really were after. Basically, all the students were functioning as if this had been explicitly stated. It was like we were on a secret mission or something. At this point, me and my roommate chose to take a slightly different approach. Originally, he and I would start the conversation with something like, "Hey, I'm walking around doing these surveys, and would you like to take one?" And on we would awkwardly go. This time, however, I chose to bluntly start the conversation with, "Hi, we're currently at a Christian school of ministry here in the city for a few weeks, and we're learning to share our faith with people. These surveys are designed to help us start up that conversation. Would you like to take it?" I don't think we received any answers of no by the end of the day, and we had actually led something like 3 people in the sinner's prayer, whereas the rest of our class had made it that far next to 0 times. This was bizarre since me and my roommate were probably considered the most socially awkward in the class and were not extremely popular. What's my point here? Quite simply, authenticity doesn't only strike me as a more honest path in evangelism, but I also found it far more emboldening and effective in these situations. It's simply practical. People did not mind frank discussion about religion right out of the gate if they knew that's what was about to happen. They didn't mind us being a bit preachy if they knew that was the point. And we knew that if they were totally closed to it, they would have said so right away. People simply appreciate true authenticity. Now, so far this has all been about cold contact evangelism, but generally this isn't what you see encouraged in church teaching on evangelism anymore. At least not in the churches I've attended. We generally see encouragement to evangelize in the context of relationships. Make friends with those outside of the faith and find a path to sharing the truth of the gospel with them in the context of doing life together. I would agree that this lends itself to more natural conversations about faith, and yet in the context of these teachings, I still hear occasional tips that are surprisingly dishonest in an attempt to sound authentic. In order to sound less like we're pressuring someone, I've been encouraged to say things like, "Don't worry, I'm not trying to convert you or anything." And then there's the inevitable encouragement to not have an agenda in the conversations you have. And I can't help but think, but am I not trying to see this person converted? Is this not evangelism? Now, at best, I think this is meant to communicate something like, make sure they know your friendship does not hinge on them converting to Christ. You'll love and care for them whether they come to agree with you or not. And that should be communicated. If it's not true of you, then you need to learn to love as Christ did better. But insofar as we are calling this evangelism, then at some level we will always have an agenda, however gently we apply it, and we will always be hoping for conversion, however patient we choose to be. Again, I believe people will always appreciate more honesty about this than less. So, to finish things up, maybe you have someone you've been talking to and you're continuing to feel building pressure to share your faith with them. You're starting to feel like a fraud. Maybe, instead of chasing after some new trick or technique, you need to deepen the friendship even more and just be honest. Not only about the message of the gospel, but also how and why it's been so hard to share it. Tell them you don't like awkwardness, but also tell them how important evangelism is in Christianity and what that inner conflict is like. Tell them you're still figuring out how to speak the gospel readily and ask if they'll help you learn to share it more clearly as you converse with them. If Christianity is truly a part of our lives, then there will always be countless ways that it can show. Every mention of it doesn't have to begin a full-blown gospel presentation. If someone asks what we're doing on Sunday, don't speak in code, tell them you're going to church. If someone asks why you abstain from certain things, tell them it's a part of your faith. All of these can be authentic doorways to further gospel conversation. And if our lives inevitably show their imperfection and don't shine in ways that inevitably provoke these gospel conversations, then we can be honest about that as well, with others and with God, proving the gospel's forgiving power. And we can ask for grace to adorn the gospel better with our good works. So, thanks for watching, everyone. I'm certainly not speaking as one claiming to have this all figured out or who has mastered winning people to Christ, but I thought sharing my experiences might be helpful, and hopefully it was. If you enjoyed yourself, here's another video you might like, and make sure you leave a like and subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you know when new projects are uploaded. So I will see you next time.